Good morning. Happy Sunday, everyone. It's time for another episode of Beyond Limits, where spirit meets science. We're streaming live here on LinkedIn and Facebook. So if you're following along there, thank you. I appreciate you joining me this morning to do that. And exciting topic today. Last week we were talking about the 7 practices of being a change maker. And today we're going to kind of go into one, like many of these episodes, about different spiritual practices that we can develop, and these are the tools for us to evolve our soul and move further on our spiritual path. So today's episode is titled Hyperfocus, Mastering the Sacred Art of Attention. So what does that mean? We're going to deep dive this, and we're going to find out how this fuels both our purpose and our awakening, okay? But before we can do that, we should define what hyperfocus is exactly. So by definition, hyperfocus is a state of intense and prolonged concentration on a task, often to the exclusion of everything else, and it's characterized by a deep immersion in the activity, leading to a diminished awareness of the surrounding environment and a reduced perception of time. Ooh, what is that? Okay, so pretty wild, though. We're going to talk about this in terms of from a neurological standpoint and also a spiritual standpoint, right? And we'll contrast the two and actually what that means and how this has been incorporated into many spiritual traditions. So hyperfocus isn't just mental discipline, it's spiritual devotion channeled through attention. Okay? From a neurological, neuroscience and contemplative science, there's been research studies done on this, on monks and long-term meditators like myself. And what they actually were showed using MRI and EEG is actually there's a heightened gamma wave activity during deep meditative states, okay, which indicates a sustained focus or even hyperfocus. And I can tell you from my own experiences, this has occurred throughout my life from the time I was a boy until today. I have constantly these experiences here. And Abraham Maslow and Stanislav Grof talked about this concept of self-transcendence, okay, and that a focused spiritual practice could catalyze higher states of consciousness. Okay, so this is kind of the clinical neurological standpoint of this, and there was something that was based in psychology, a concept called flow. Now, you may have heard me say this, but also it's about being in the flow. What do we mean by that? Okay, so that means the total immersion in an activity that's that could be just maybe you're doing focused on doing something that you love to do or whatever, but also it parallels with spiritual states like samadhi, which is yoga, and dhyana, so Buddhism. Okay, where hyperfocus dissolves the sense of the self, and obviously this happens during concentration, or a heightened concentration, I'd say, during prayer and meditation. It's part of spiritual life. And if these are practices that you haven't developed or you're trying to develop, we'll talk about some tools later on how to do this and move you further along your spiritual path and able to do these sorts of things. Now, in the spiritual traditions, I mentioned samadhi, which is in yoga and Buddhism. Samadhi means it's a state of complete absorption in focused awareness, which is often happens through meditation or deep meditation, and it's the spiritual counterpart of hyperfocus. So we have the clinical piece of this where we can actually measure this with MRI and EEGs, and people have done that. But also, I should mention also in the research, there's been research that shows that the biochemistry changes as well, and that some that have been studied who have been able to get in these deep meditative states have been able to even slow down their heart rate and breathing to the point where it goes against your autonomous systems in your body that automatically you don't have to think about your heart beating, right? But physically with your mind, slow your heart rate down and that sort of thing. And this will happen when you're doing meditation, for sure. You can do that. And dharana, which is a practice of sustained attention, it's outlined in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, right? And this is talking about, of course, meditation and ultimately reaching this samadhi, which is this hyperfocus spiritual discipline, right? So those are the different neurological and spiritual standpoints of what hyperfocus is. And let's clarify that and contrast that this is not hyperfixation. Okay, this is another term for that, where you're fixed on one particular thing and you're obsessed with it. And this is kind of a common trait with, obsessive compulsive people that are focused on that. Now that's kind of a distraction. It's a negative sort of thing in a way, because you're obsessed with it and you're not really, it's a different energy. So it's not the same as what we're talking about with hyperfocus. Now, this being present in these spiritual traditions and through meditation and deep meditation is a gateway to transcendence, all right? And like I said before, hyperfocus isn't just mental discipline. It's spiritual devotion channeled through attention. That's important to understand. Now, how do we, as everyday folks here, how do we develop these sorts of things? So I think by illustration, it would be good for me to share some personal stories of myself and how I was able to achieve this kind of experiential state of awareness. And it's actually pretty amazing. But again, this has been, you've heard the stories before throughout history or whatever, spiritual masters across different traditions that had awakenings during profound moments of focus, that sort of thing. Even you may have had these yourself in some experiences you've had in your life, that sort of thing. But I'm here to tell you there's a biochemical and energetic thing going on from a scientific standpoint, but then also there's something going on from a spiritual standpoint. And if you think about being focused on something like that, now maybe you've been focused on doing a task or something, and you're able to lose track of time or something. You may have experienced this before. Well, that means you were in that kind of state of hyperfocus. Now, what if we could take that and direct that at a particular exercise to develop our spiritual practice to become that change maker we talked about last week, to do that? So I've had many of these instances throughout my life, and the reason I can remember them with such vivid detail, because they were deeply profound and prophetic, or they energetically imprinted upon my mind and my soul. And we'll talk about the sacred geometry of our soul and the energy of all that and how we change our spiritual DNA, because attention is the spiritual currency of consciousness. Now, I remember when I was like 10 years old, I loved to climb trees, and I was very adventurous, that sort of thing. And the boys and I in the neighborhood where I was about 10 years old, there was huge, upstate New York, these huge pine trees. And there was a really big one. We used to play underneath it. We had like a whole fort built underneath it. It was so big. And wide at the base and then more narrow at the top, but taller than the 2-story houses around there. And we all had this challenge one day that we were all going to climb this tree, and I did. I climbed. I was the only one that climbed all the way through the top, because it's hard when you're climbing a pine tree. There's lots of sap, and branches get more and more. There's more of them at the top, and you got to kind of push through that to get to the top. And I remember getting to the top and looking out and seeing above all the houses, and it was a spring or summer. It was a warm day or whatever, and the breeze was blowing, the tree was moving. Pretty amazing. I was totally immersed in that for a moment. I still remember that today as if it was yesterday. And then I've had other moments throughout my life, just a couple more examples. And I give you a really profound example that sticks with me today as well. There was a period of time, when I'm doing my writing. Okay, so by the way, all my writing's original. No AI wrote. I've been writing for decades, so no AI writes my stuff, my books. Okay, that's all my words. But that flow of creation, when I'm in a writing mode, okay, it's not something like I just sit down and I just write. It's usually after I've been meditating and I'm alone by myself and I have the chance to go within. And then as I'm meditating, I'm raising that vibrational energy, and then this is when I make this connection to the divine source. And it's wild when I write a poem, whether it's an inspirational or love poem or whatever, the energy of that, something will come into my mind about a particular aspect of that poem whatever I'm writing about. In fact, I don't even know at that stage what the title of the poem is. It's not like I write the title, now I'm going to write a poem for it. It's not how my creative process works. And so I'm sitting there, and I can remember one time I was sitting and writing this poem, I was listening to some music. It was in Las Vegas, Nevada, and it was a very windy, warm evening, and I had the windows open, the breeze was blowing through the apartment and just moving the curtains, and then it was just like the presence of the divine presence of energy there was incredible. It was powerful. And then it starts flowing through me. And then as I start to write the poem, the first verse, that actually anchors that expression, that divine expression flowing through me for that particular poem. So in reality, sometimes I've gone through and written the whole poem in that state, and that's a hyper-focused state where it's just the words are just flowing through. Sometimes I maybe write one or two verses, and that anchors that in that space. So when I go back to it, I can go away from it there, and then I can go back to it and reconnect to that particular energy of what that poem is about, or whatever inspirational writing that I'm writing about. It connects me with that, and then I can meditating, get back into that state and reconnect. It's like plug back in, and then I'll finish writing the poem. And then things will come to me, just say, oh yeah, we need to talk about this aspect or whatever. So it's a beautiful, beautiful creative process. In fact, a colleague said to me just this week, as a matter of fact, she said, I'm in constant awe of your creative energy. But where does that creative energy come from? It comes from a state of being able to move into this hyper-focus. And it's raising your vibrational energy level where you're connecting with divine source. And suddenly other things that distract you don't matter anymore. You're able to be in that space. It's a beautiful place to be in. Now, probably the most profound example I could say was when I was, I think it was 2010, and I was in Parowan, Utah. It's in southern Utah, just across the border from Nevada. And I was at a 5-day intensive workshop in a ropes course. Now, a ropes course is where you do these, they put the harness on you, the helmet, and you do all these activities outdoors. And part of that, we had some physical activities of other things, but then we had the ropes course, and there was 5 events, so to speak. Each of them have a name, and that are supposed to help teach you. It actually promotes a state of hyperfocus. But the most power, and they all have degrees of difficulty to do them, like if going across ladders or ropes or whatever it is. But there's one that's called the focus line, and for good reason. Because if you lose your focus for just a second, you fall. And what does that look like? It's 2 telegraph poles to the center complex, and you're on the outskirts, and you climb a telegraph pole just like the high wire guys do, the electricians and stuff. For power companies, you climb it all the way up. I don't know, you're more than 2 stories up in the air. It's quite tall. And then there's a thick metal cable that's tied between the 2 poles. And then you're given a rope that's probably about this big around that you're holding, that's connected to another pole way on the other side. So it's quite a lot. It's quite heavy because the rope's really thick, and then it's a really long rope, and there's nothing to hold on to. You get up to the pole, and then you've got the rope. Then the next thing you have to do is you have to go to the center complex and touch the other pole, and across this metal cable across that. And the only way to do that is to walk across it. It's like the tightrope guys, they have something for balance, right? They walk those tight ropes and with the big poles, right? Well, that's how they're able to balance. Well, this, you don't have anything to do that with. All you have is the rope that you're holding on to. So the only way you can move across this sideways is by leaning into it and letting go. And this is part of that process of moving into the state of hyperfocus. You have to move into this place of letting go. Letting go of all the noise of the day, all the chaos, all the technology that we get tied to, and put that aside. Don't even focus on that. And I remember that in the first few seconds as you're trying to go across, because it's at an angle, so you have to constantly keep the rope pulled taut so that you don't fall. Now you've got a safety harness, and there's a guy with a safety line holding you in case you do fall. And just about everybody falls in the first few seconds. You just fall off. I didn't do that. Maybe that's because I've had years of meditative practice or whatever, but there was a lot of people on the ground, and my partners were down there and stuff like that. They're all encouraging me or whatever. But here's what happened. As I started to move across, I looked across and just focused on the mountains. And this is in a cool morning in April, and there was a nice breeze, like a spring morning, but it was very cool. And the clouds were moving through, and you could hear the birds. But then I just went into this state of immersion into the beauty of this landscape. And as I did that, I didn't even hear anybody talking to me anymore. It started to fade to where it wasn't even audible. And the only thing that I could hear was the wind and the energy of that. And I moved all the way across and moved into this, touched the pole and whatever. Now you might ask, how do you get down? That's a different thing. You move back over to the middle and you fall back and just let go and do a trust fall with the guy with your safety line. Pretty amazing experience. Now, I can remember every detail of that. Anytime I want to meditate, I can go into that and I can move into the state of hyperfocus. Now, these are just some examples in my own life of these moments, and they weren't just productive, okay? So in other words, it wasn't just in that moment and that was it, a one-off thing. These things actually energetically change your spiritual DNA. And then it opens up that portal. Same thing with my writing, same thing with other experiences I've had in meditation. I've been in meditation where, I have incense burning here and I have a stained glass, and then being in where time stopped actually. I didn't hear anything else, and the smoke kind of slowed down from the incense and it moved into the state. Really surreal. And all of these experiences are very surreal in terms of moving into them. But all it is that you're connected with divine source. And you're allowing it to come in to line up with your vibrational energy. And what does that do? Everything's energy, so it's going to change who you are. With practice, it's just practice as well. So it's not just, even these one-off experiences that I had that were unique, still sit with me today. Now, as I'm in business and building my health tech company, NutriSelect, and I'm focused on that, it allows me to hyper-focus on the tasks at hand, and it creates this creative energy and a knowing of which direction to go, which person to talk to, which is the next step in the path of building this business. And this is something you can do to apply in your own lives and what you want to do. Okay? Now, let's talk about hyperfocus as a soul technology. Think of it as a technology. It's like a laser beam of your soul. It permanently maps energetically the sacred geometry of your soul. Now, I talk a lot about sacred geometry. I mean, if you just go out and look in nature, for example, you can see the beauty. And I've done tons of camping over the years and backpacking or whatever. But when you're out in nature, you don't have all these modern day distractions, and cell phones, that sort of thing. So you're really able to take the time to observe nature, and I recommend you really do this. It's a beautiful thing to do, even if it's just going to the beach, if you're near a beach, and you can go watch the sunrise or the sunset, depending on where you are. It's really a beautiful practice to start developing within yourself, because it does on an energetic level, because everything is energy. If you think about it, you align with this sacred geometry, which focuses your creative energy, where it moves you from internal chaos into a place of order. And as you're able to line these things up, you're able to see clearly. And you're able to know what is the next thing that you're supposed to do on this particular path that you're on. So I love Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching, which translates to the Book of the Way. And he has a verse, a 15th verse that goes, it's a long verse, but the last paragraph of the verse says, "But muddiest water clears as it is stilled, and out of the stillness life arises." So it's a very profound message, because the only way we can get to where we can clear the muddy water is to develop our spiritual practice and our hyperfocus on the particular experience that we're in. Now, how do we do that? So let's talk about some practical tools that you can use to cultivate this hyperfocus. All right. So I've talked about already. Daily meditation sharpens your attention, and again, it's a practice just like anything else. To get really good at it, you got to practice it every day. I mean, a violinist or first chair violinist practices for hours and hours daily to become that. And don't you know that they're in a hyper focus when they're playing music and they're connected? It's a creative process that you're in that space of hyper focus and that energy of creation. And I mean, you've probably heard beautiful music or seen it live, and if you've never been to the symphony, it's a powerful experience, actually, and I can see why some people are into that and some are not. It's not the same as turning on your iTunes or whatever and Spotify and listening to music there. This is a different experience. But there's an energy to everything like that. So when something's beautiful, it resonates with you and it kind of feels good as you're listening to it. So daily meditation, for sure, is something you need to develop as part of your spiritual practice. And, all the years that I've been doing this, and decades literally, and that I've been trying to teach others and help others, I do have some guided meditations that I've produced, audios that you can listen to. If you go to my website at drbillclark.life, and if you go to the resources page, you can go find the Spotify channel, Insights for the Soul. And these are previous talks that I've given over the years, but also there's some guided meditations there that you can listen to. And they're only about 11 or 12 minutes each. So, I invite you to go listen to those and do that. Now, the other part of meditation is your breath work and creating awareness of your breathing. Breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth is how you kind of breathe into this process of moving into that state. And when I do this, and I've checked it on my Fitbit here, I can actually see my heart rate drop dramatically as I move into this breathing, deep breathing, and as I'm beginning into my meditation. And of course, what's going to help is, and this is what I call the holy trinity of your practice, of how you move through your path, is exercise and eating right, and your spiritual practice. All these things work in conjunction together energetically. Another way to help cultivate this sacred focus or hyperfocus is to journal and write. Now, through the 90s, I did tons of journaling and started writing down my dreams and experiences and all these different things. I didn't leave anything to chance. In other words, I didn't take it as, I took everything as value. Some of it seemed nonsensical or didn't make sense, but the practice of writing, this is something we've lost, by the way. And actually, when I'm writing, I'll show you. I actually have my book here that I use for writing down things. And why do I do that? Because I made sure I could write it on the computer, and eventually that's where it ends up. But the important thing is that the physical action of writing words and writing it down. Now, every poem that I've written and everything I've started to write, I wrote by hand first. And the reason for that was because it enables you to become more hyper-focused in what you're, whatever the activity is that you're doing. So when I'm writing a poem, I'm writing it, and maybe I have the words, and there's a cadence to it in terms of, especially with poetry, there's a cadence to my poetry, and actually even a rhyming that comes into it automatically in a beautiful way that I couldn't just sit there and just think up. It just happens from being in this actual state of hyperfocus. Okay? So, recommend you journal. Start doing it every day. Keep a book by your bedside. Keep it wherever you handy with you. I have several hardbound books I have all over the house that I pick up when I feel compelled to write something. Now, the other practice you could do is really important is you got to set boundaries with technology. You got to turn off the computer, you got to turn off the phone, put it away. Now, how many times have you gotten on social media and lost track of time and as you're watching all the reels? I know you've done it. Okay. So put it away, turn off the phone. Go away from your computer. Go write, go out in nature, go breathe the air, go do something like that. And make this a regular practice as well. Because all of these things working together are going to facilitate you moving into this attention of hyperfocus and as part of your spiritual practice. You can think of it as this practice, hyperfocus practice, as a form of worship or prayer. I just call it a spiritual practice or sacred focus. So anyway, these are some tools that you can use to do that. All right? Now, let's talk about some things for you to take away with to integrate into what you're doing in your path. And I just have one question. Where in your life is your attention fragmented? And so give that some thought. Think about how you are fragmented in something that you're trying to do. Now, that happens also when we get tired. We get off focus and we can't. It happens to me. I've worked long hours and the business, and I've got multiple ventures going on, and I've got my books coming out, and then I've got my business I'm building. So I switch from one to the other. I take a break in between, and then I go maybe meditate, and then I move into the next creative process, and I turn on the energy for that one. And so it's part of a practice to develop to do that. Now, you don't have to take on multiple things at the same time, and then you can prioritize these or whatever. But when you're tired, make sure you're getting plenty of sleep. This is really important. But when you're tired, then you lose your focus, and you know that because either you start falling asleep or you can't find the words or whatever. Then just stop at that point. So wherever your attention is fragmented, stop, take a break, go do something, listen to music, go take a walk, whatever that helps you shift through that energy and it re-energizes you. And I'm a big believer in power naps. 20 minutes, boom, go do it. It re-energizes and hyper-focus. And I love it when I'm able to do that. Don't beat yourself up saying, I don't have time for that, I got to get this done or whatever. Well, you'll be more effective if you can actually shift your energy and stop for a moment and do that. You don't have to do it for a long period of time, just for long enough where you can kind of shift that energy and be able to move back into a place of focus. Now, many times in our lives, we're focused on activities and doing tasks or whatever. But how often are we really hyper-focused, right? Now, you can get hyper-focused on something when it's something you're passionate about and love to do. And again, I'll talk about more of this as I'll tease it out as we get closer to my TEDx talk, which is coming up towards the end of the year in the fall. We don't have a stage yet. That's where we're at. We're at the process of finding a stage for me to do my talk. The title of that is The 5 Keys to Unlocking Your Spiritual Awakening. So stay tuned for more information on that. Those 5 keys are really critical. There's a whole story about how that came about. And part of this hyper-focus practice, or part of my spiritual practice, was I went away to a cabin for 4 days and went to write. And that's where the birth of that book and the workshop that I've done in this, and now it's going to be a TEDx talk. So really powerful. Stay tuned for more on that. And again, I encourage you to go back and look at my guided meditations. And I'm going to produce more of these. It's on my to-do list. But right now I'm focused on getting my next book out. My first book, Divine Whispers, Poems of Love and Spirit. And I did a post on this throughout my social media. So I invite you to follow me on social media. Got any questions or comments or that you want to ask, please do. Please reach out to me to do that. I'll respond to you as I'm able to do it. And really work on developing your spiritual practice. And so this is one thing that we're talking about today with Hyperfocus. Go back now and kind of maybe journal on this and think about where you can move into developing that. Now, the more and more that you can do that practice of meditation and moving into that, the more and more you'll be able to you'll have more of these experiences of hyperfocus. And you just need to take time to do it, that's all. So again, I want to thank you for joining me today. Have a great rest of your weekend. Please follow me on my website at drbillclark.life, and you can find all the social media links there to Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube. They're all there. And also, I'll be doing regular posts on my next talk for next Sunday, and then also upcoming events. The book, my first book's probably going to be available in the next week or two. So I'm working towards that. So stay tuned for more information on that. And with that, I wish you a blessed day with love and gratitude. I'm Dr. Bill.